All right, welcome everyone to the first episode of Bear Dash, where we will be talking all things Cal football. I am one of your co-hosts, Shailin, Singh. I am a rising senior at Berkeley. Spent a lot of time covering Cal football and working for the Daily Californian as a whole. This is my co-host, Jasper.
Hi, I'm Jasper Kenzo Sundeen. I'm another Daily Cal football beat writer, sports writer, former sports editor. Here to give you all things Cal football.
Today, we're going to be talking about how the Pac-12 postponement is going to affect Cal as a team and its players. And then at the end, the last few minutes, we're going to talk about the We Are United movement and whether that's even feasible. What parts of it do we agree with? What parts we don't? Feel free to ask questions as you have them in the live chat. We're going to be checking that throughout. We want you guys to interact with us as much as possible. So let's get into it. First question, how will the postponement of the season affect the Cal football team as a whole? Jasper, take it away.
Any way you look at it, this postponement absolutely hurts Cal's chances in the Pac-12 North. Cal's biggest single advantage coming into this season, the experience. The team was returning 18 starters on both sides of the ball, their entire offense. Luke Beckett and Zanda Johnson on the defensive line had just come in for their 6 year of eligibility. This team was stacked, tons of experience. The Pac-12 North was devoid of it. You have new coaches at Wazoo, UW. You have new quarterbacks at almost every other Pac-12 North school. That experience that Cal had, that chemistry was going to be key to any challenge for the Pac-12 North title. And this gap and this postponement just gives other teams an opportunity to make up that experience, to gel, to get their freshmen involved in a way that Cal didn't need.
Yeah, I think that it does suck that Cal had so much hype coming into the season. I mean, most power rankings had Oregon number 1, and then it was kind of a toss-up between Cal and Washington number 2. So that obviously sucks that, there's all these experienced, potentially draftable players next year that they wanted to play and they're ready to play, and you said they have the edge over people. But I think in some ways it still does help because Cal itself had one of the worst offenses in the Pac-12 last season, and not just the Pac-12, the entire country. So they're installing a new offense, learning a new playbook, and Bill Musgrave emphasized that there's a lot of brand new terminology for the entire offense. A lot of language is going to be the exact same as what he used in the NFL. So I think you're totally right about everything you said. About as a whole, it hurts, but there are ways that Cal is going to benefit from it. And not that Garbers and co needed the extra time. He said himself that he felt like he was understanding the playbook just fine. But I think that, there's plenty of time for other teams to catch up, like you were saying.
Yeah. And like you said, Garbers is really going to be helped by having a lot of quality time with Musgrave. I know we've talked to folks within Cal football, and it sounds like they've really taken to Zoom as a necessary workspace. But I still can't help but think, Cal's strength, both last season, the season before, the entire Justin Wilcox era, it's been defense. Defense has been the name of the game. It's what made them successful. This was a defensive unit with plenty of experience, with a lot of talent. And giving other teams opportunities to learn new playbooks, to sort of come in to get gelled. I think that's not going to help the Bears at all.
Yeah, but with the other quarterbacks though, like you said, teams like Oregon, Washington are coming in with new quarterbacks, but you don't get the same on-field experience just by watching film or going through the playbook. And it's the same thing with Cal's new offense. I think that they are going to have the other teams are going to have more time to gel, but it's in the sense that like the quarterback can go, throw routes with the receivers, but they're not getting, in game or training camp looks where, Cal isn't going to have that same thing either. But I don't think that's as much of a factor as like you or some people play it out to be, because without legitimate camp and legitimate training, I don't think that leads to that much chemistry. I don't know. That might be something that needs to come from a player's perspective, because I know like in the NFL, Matt Ryan before this, completely separate from the team. He takes his receivers out and he takes his running back to Florida, and he just hosts his own little camp. And I don't know like what the Falcons would look like with that and without that. There's no way to tell. But I don't think that the on their own time kind of stuff has that much of an effect.
Yeah. At the same time, I mean, another factor that could play a massive role in who's going to have experience, who's going to have chemistry coming into camp and coming into a potential spring season is differing regulations between states, right? I mean, we in California have very specific rules and regulations surrounding who has access, who should be quarantining, if you have access to fields, to facilities. I mean, differing regulations by state are going to give different people opportunities to build that chemistry. So I think that's another massive factor down the stretch. And obviously that's something we can't know, right? Like who knows what the situation is going to look like in a month? Who knows what it'll look like in California or in Oregon or in Washington? But I think that's certainly something that a card that could be played and could change up the game a little bit.
Yeah, and like that's the whole thing that makes this entire situation so like annoying as a team, because you don't know what to prepare for. Like there's always in the history of sports been like set times, like camp, season, like X game. Here we have, no idea when anything is going to happen. So it is like the player's decision how far in advance they want to, start doing X, Y, and Z, start this training regimen. And it's just like, I don't even know where to, start with like how teams are going to prepare for a season when we don't even know if there will be a season or when it's going to start. So I think just as a whole, Cal's experience is obviously going to be a massive factor whenever the season does start. Like, I don't think you can take that away. I think as a whole, the Pac-12 and every individual team is hurt by there being no fall football. That I don't think the answer would be different for any other team. No fall football sucks. And whether or not it happens in the spring, Cal's experience is going to be a massive factor. They've seen all these teams and played really well against them in the Justin Wilcox era. There's been no teams that have blown Cal out, every time they've played. Justin Wilcox's defense, he has his way of, keeping Cal in the fight. So I think either way, the experience is going to be there. Unless you have anything else to say, we can go on to individual players. Who do you think will be most affected by the postponement?
I actually wanted to touch on one more point. I think more than the actual postponement in the time, a critical factor could be changing schedules. I know before the postponement, the Pac-12 had moved to an all-conference schedule. A lot of other conferences are doing that, whether they're postponing or not. And again, it's too soon to tell what the spring season would look like. But Cal is 4-5 against conference opponents in its last two seasons. The reason Cal's been bowl eligible the last few years has been non-conference games. I mean, Wilcox is undefeated in non-conference regular season games. And people have talked a lot about a big jump for Cal football going from sort of bowl eligibility to a dark horse contender. But it's also a big jump to go from like 4-5 to maybe 8-2 in a 10-game conference season. So I think that could be more critical. Like, who does Cal play, and can whatever is holding Wilcox up and holding this Cal Bears team up change?
Yeah, I think that, Cal's obviously been way more successful against non-conference opponents than conference opponents. But I think, like I was just saying before this, we've been close in like the vast majority of the conference games. So, and it feels like this was finally the season where we had like the tipping point where, the offense was going to be just good enough to, put up 30 points, and the defense is going to consistently allow 20. Like, there were games where we would score, 12 points, and the defense would allow 13. Like, it's horrible. It was horrible to watch that. And finally, when you think Cal has all this momentum, bowl game, the offense looked great. When Garbers was quarterback the entire last season, Cal's offense was good. Like, it wasn't great, but it was still enough to win games with the defense that Wilcox built. And I think that, as a team, conference schedule is not going to be, it's not going to be as bad as it was in other seasons. I think that there's no guaranteed wins in the Pac-12, but I would be very surprised if, when the Pac-12 comes back, that Cal had another losing record in conference play. But onto individual players, who do you think is going to benefit the most and or the least from the season being postponed?
Look, you talked about it earlier. A lot of people have been talking about Chase Garber's growth. I mean, to say his sophomore season in the pocket, his freshman season in the pocket, where day and night is an exaggeration, or is an understatement, really. I mean, the kid was phenomenal. He was more aware, willing to throw the ball away when he's in trouble, but also willing to make the tough throws when he was in trouble. And a lot of people are going to say Garbers is going to have more time to work with Musgrave. But for me, it's Elijah Hicks. He's in his final year of eligibility. He's moving from cornerback to safety. And there's just a lot of question marks there. Cal's secondary was vaunted, to say the least. They were known. You talk about the takers. You talk about the defensive backs unit. I mean, whether it's interceptions, whether it's tying down highly rated quarterbacks. But Gerald Alexander, the coach who made that, is gone. And Elijah Hicks is now moving into a starting safety position that he's never played before. He's got a new coach. This time can only help him. He's going to have a chance to, look at tape, to talk with Coach Yates, the new defensive backs coach, to talk with Wilcox, to talk with other safeties and get a better handle on that position. It can only help him settle in.
Yeah, he's been here forever. I mean, he's gonna be a baller no matter where he is on the field. And him, Cam Bynum, Ashton Davis, and Jalen Hawkins were known, like, nationally in Sports Illustrated and stuff, for how much film they watched. They would always go to Cam and Elijah's apartment and just analyze film nonstop. And I think that Hicks really now just needs those on-field reps of safety, because I think he has the mental game pat down. I mean, Cam Bynum, Wilcox said, is going to be playing a lot of safety too. They're trying to throw as many different looks at the offense as possible. So I think Hicks is going to be, just as good at safety as he was at corner, and he just needs to get a feel for it in practice and in camp whenever that happens. But I think in terms of people who could benefit the most, I touched on this earlier, the entire offense, just learning more time to learn the terminology, more time to learn the playbook. But individual players, we've seen a lot of top college prospects threaten to opt out, if not opt out, based on what the Pac-12 is doing right now. So I think that, out of Cal's next year draft prospects, there's a few right off the bat, guys like Cam Bynum, Cam Good. There's a few borderline players, Coin Dang, Mike Zafel. I think if the season gets pushed to spring, that is bad news for Cal in terms of those players specifically, because players with draft potential might want to get healthy before the combine, because you're looking at a spring season and then a combine very soon after that, and then the fall NFL/college season if everything goes back to normal. And I think guys like that are going to not just consider, but, probably sit out, at least a few guys per team, sit out either the entire season or the latter half of the season, or more than what we traditionally see with, players here and there sitting out bowl games.
Yeah, but, and I mean, granted, you've seen Cal players do this before. Ashton Davis, he had injury problems heading into the combine in the draft last season, sat out of the Red Box Bowl. But I think the equation is different here. I mean, you got plenty of Cal players that are draft prospects, but with other players around the nation sitting out, this is a big opportunity to improve your draft stock. I mean, Cam Bynum, Cam Good, these are guys that, they're great players. We've seen them play for a couple of years now, but to say they're day one draft picks, to say they're top prospects is a bit of an exaggeration. Now, to say that they can't be those top prospects is a bold-faced lie. These guys are talented.
No, that's the thing I'm worried about is that they play maybe they're so given that there is a spring season, right? Maybe they play 6 games and one of them, we'll use Cam Bynum as an example. If he's absolutely just balling out there and he's getting national attention, but say there's a month left in the season, but the combine is like 2 months away, 3 months away, is he gonna just once he's getting that national attention and he sees himself in mock drafts and stuff, is he gonna threaten to sit out, or not threaten to sit out? Is he just it's his own choice? I mean, you can't really fault him for it, but is he gonna want to spend that time getting healthy and training? I mean, there's players that have said, not on Cal, but nationally, players who have already opted out and are just going to fully focus on training for the combine and for the draft. I mean, like you said, those are probably mostly players who do have their draft stocks kind of set where they want them, which I don't think anyone on Cal has that. But I think even if they get their draft stock to where they want earlier in the season, that could mean they sit out the latter half or the games that actually matter down the stretch.
I don't know. I mean, for me, this is two big components. What does the spring season look like? I mean, we know COVID-19 poses a health risk, not just for your immediate prospects, but it can have long-term health effects. Don't quote me on that. I'm not a doctor. I'm not an expert, but I mean, there are very real consequences to contracting COVID-19. So, I mean, that's a factor, right? If you're traveling a lot, maybe you do want to sit out and not take that risk. At the same time, we've said it again and again, this Cal team is a dark horse contender, right? If you're rolling after those 6 games, Cal's 5-1. I mean, could you really say no to that? Could you really sit out when you got a potential Rose Bowl berth on the line?
That's true. And I think Wilcox has established that kind of culture where, every team says this, but it is like a brotherhood or a family in some way. And I think that just from talking to those players myself, I do think it's unlikely that someone would sit out if Cal was doing really well, but you have to look at it in a business perspective, because the NFL is a business and you have to create yourself as the best product you can be heading into the draft. And for a lot of players, that means not risking injury, no matter what situation your team's in. So I'm not here to say Cam Bynum would or would not do this. I just think in the Pac-12 as a whole, and Cal has a couple players in that bubble, I think it's gonna happen. I don't know who, but if there's a spring season, there's gonna be players sitting out.
Yeah, and like you said, so much of this is up in the air. There's so much we can't know, but there are plenty of opportunities, and that sense of brotherhood, I mean, cuts both ways. I imagine a lot of people would understand. I mean, you do have to protect your investment. And at the same time, I think Cal players stand to gain so much. I think like last year, you had guys like Weaver and Davis who really were high on a lot of watch lists. I mean, I think Davis has been a top prospect since the end of his junior season at Cal, but I don't see anyone in this batch of recruits who's getting that same level of attention. Again, they might have that talent, but I don't see them having that same level of attention, and I think that makes a huge difference.
All right, we'll move on to our final question. We have about 12 minutes left in today's episode. We're talking a lot about uncertainty, but Pac-12 players made their demands very, very clear. What do we think about them? The hashtag We Are United movement, are the demands reasonable?
Yeah.
And this is kind of a case by, like a point by point, because they literally listed out their exact demands. And for those who don't know, Cal football players Valentino Daltoso, Jay Curran, and Josh Drayden helped lead this movement. I've had the chance to talk to Drayden many times. He's very involved in social justice and creating a better environment for players and African Americans as a whole. And I could really see that, his kind of thought process behind this and why they want certain things, but we'll get into whether we think they can actually happen. What do you think?
The details of it, and a lot of people say the devil's in the details. the details of it, like you said, are a point-by-point basis. Some of these seem extremely reasonable. Some of them are a bit crazy, especially given just the precedent set in a lot of college sports situations. But I think the underlying ask here is not unreasonable at all. I think the underlying ask, and it's something that was there at the beginning, it's there now even after the cancellation, is that players want a voice in the process. Players want a seat at the table. And that's something that's irrespective of seasons getting canceled. That's something that's irrespective of teams playing or not. I mean, I think Justin Fields at Ohio State just put together a petition to run the season, but he's asking for the same thing. It's that players be involved. The Pac-12 players are asking for something similar, whether the season happens or not. And a lot of times you'll see sort of the higher ups in the conference in press releases, in interviews, they're always saying we have the players' best interests at heart. But I think it's undeniable that the players have their own best interests at heart. I mean, I think that's a little patronizing.
Yeah, I think that's where the clash is too. Like there's like with the whole Justin Fields thing and this Pac-12 movement, the players don't really understand the business perspective of Pac-12 sports, because Pac-12 sports, if you're unaware, are in a very bad spot. Like every school, pretty much. I mean, Stanford is one of the richest schools. They might be the richest. I don't know, but they're cutting sports. And Cal has a $500 million stadium debt that they're trying to pay off. But the players are saying to distribute 50% of Pac-12 revenue to all athletes evenly. And they're also saying to cut coaches and administrator paychecks. So I think that, they have the right intentions, and they deserve compensation for what they're doing. But a lot of what they asked for was extremely contradictory to other things they asked for, because they asked to not cut sports, but then they asked to give half the revenue to the players, which those just can't exist at the same time. And they talked about ending facility expenditures that are lavish and using endowment funds to preserve sports. But football is about recruiting. College football is about recruiting, and the best athletes want the best facilities. They want the best everything. And not everyone has an Aaron Rodgers who's willing to donate $1 million for a new locker room. And football teams have to make that investment. They have to be able to say, okay, well, if we want better players, which means a better team, which means more fans, which means more revenue, we might have to invest our own $1 million into a better locker room. And I think it's that part that players who are on the team and have already been recruited and are looking towards the future, they're kind of missing that part. I think all of the social stuff is more than right for the players, and it should have happened a long time ago. But it's the fiscal economic stuff that just makes no sense to me. And that's a whole talk about capitalism and all this other stuff that we're not going to get into.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you. A lot of the demands on the social justice front are absolutely reasonable. A lot of the demands on the personal health and personal safety front are also extremely reasonable. I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic. The players have every right to demand for that treatment and to feel safe, and for their families and loved ones to feel safe. But on the other end, I think these demands at face value are unreasonable, but that's almost the point here. Because you can't go into this and ask for something small. You're negotiating here. You're playing hardball with the Pac-12. You got to go ask for something big. I mean, even the fact that we're going to talk about it and we're going to turn this over is important, right? Because that gets those gears turning. And then the question isn't whether they should be compensated or not. The question becomes, how much should they be compensated?
Yeah, they're going to get something out of this. Like that's a given. Once coronavirus aside, something's going to come out. The conference is probably focusing most of their efforts right now on the player health side of things, and trying to get these athletes back on the field, because that's probably at the end of the day what the athletes care about the most. I mean, I don't want to speak for them, but I think they can't get paid for something they're not even doing. So I think the Pac-12 kind of put, some of these demands on the back burner for now. But I think you're right; they will come up eventually, and the players will get something out of this.
Yeah. And the Pac-12, I think, needs to do a better job when these things do come up. I think we've seen a disconnect right now between what the Pac-12 is saying and what players are saying. Larry Scott came out of that meeting and he felt like it was productive. I think that's something he's been quoted saying, that he felt like it went well. And players, I think, said a lot of the opposite. They didn't feel like they'd been heard. They haven't met since. And that goes back to this. I mean, the Pac-12 has to be able to sit down and talk with players.
So what do you think, though? Because everyone says that, but what do you think that means? Like, what? So say in a theoretical scenario, the Pac-12 got their executives and they brought in 30 student athletes and say they were like all in the same room or whatever. What would constitute that being successful, like a successful meeting? Do you think that, like, because there's a difference between like players feeling like they're being heard versus actual change coming out of that? And like the Pac-12 is claiming, yeah, we hear the players, like we understand their needs, but then they're not doing anything. So do you think it's something where like the Pac-12 has to act immediately?
I mean, I think that there's two sides of this. I mean, you have to act quickly, and there has to be immediate change, but it's also a larger structural shift. If you want the players to really have power, if you think the players deserve power, which they do, I think there needs to be a larger change in the power structure and how decisions are made. And that's not something that happens overnight. But I think the first step is making sure players are in the loop. A lot of players express frustration that they didn't know what was happening when the season was postponed. That was news they found out after announcement. And I think if the Pac-12 really wants to show it cares, that's a good place to start. Just make sure people know what's going on.
Yeah, and a lot of people say look to the NCAA or look to other conferences, but a lot of the issues the Pac-12 players were bringing up are issues that are issues in other conferences. But then again, a lot of those issues are issues that other conferences don't even have to deal with. Like the Pac-12 over the next 5 years is each Pac-12 school individually is going to make on average 20 million less than Big 10 schools. And so there's economic problems that the Big 10 just doesn't have to deal with and that the SEC doesn't have to deal with. So I think that a lot of the stuff the Pac-12 players were saying should happen on a national level, whether it be through the NCAA or another governing body. I mean, no one really knows what's happening with the NCAA right now, but that's something they need to. Now's the time with the whole Black Lives Matter movement, just illuminating issues that have been in existence forever, including in sports. Now's the time where they have the chance to finally take action. And we have a couple minutes left. We have one question in the chat from Emily. Hey guys, if you have time, what's one Cal game you two were looking forward to this season? You want to kick us off?
Yeah, so thank you, Emily. We can't know the schedule. No one does, though we wish we did. For me, look, a lot of people say Oregon. Cal fans will say Sanford. For me, it's Arizona State. That's the big one. Cal has hung with Oregon the last 2 years. I mean, heck, they had a chance to upset Oregon in Eugene last year with Devin Modster starting in. I think Arizona State's the biggest trap game. It's going to be on the road. The teams are on the same trajectory in terms of sort of dark horse status in their respective halves of the Pac-12. That's a game where it might not have the same level of attention, but Cal's really struggled against Arizona teams, and a win against Arizona State would go a long way.
Yeah, you said it yourself. A lot of fans are going to say Oregon. I'm one of those. I do agree that Arizona State is not a game you can sleep on whatsoever. But I think Cal is at the level, or at least we think they're at the level where, they could take down Oregon. And if they take down Oregon, that's kind of like a turning point for the program and for the Justin Wilcox era. So that was a game I was really looking forward to, still am. But
it's a turning point in the scope of the Pac-12 North. I mean, that's an earth shaker.
Exactly. But that's pretty much all the time we have for today. We'll probably get more into recruiting in further episodes. Also talk more about potential schedule, potential games, potential matchups, things like that. But thank you guys for watching. If you want to have your questions answered in the next episode, feel free to tweet us. You can follow us on social at Dash Sports TV on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Also, go to our website, dashsports.com or .tv. Sorry about that. And that's all we have for today. Thank you guys for watching.